If you've ever scrolled down to the bottom of a web page and discovered a footer that seems to be revealed from behind the content of the page, you may have wondered what would be the easiest way to pull that off in Framer. Today, I'll show you a method to do it in just a few steps. Let's jump in. Let's jump right into my example project here, where I've got a simple page. I've got some content here broken into 3 sections. I've got this header section, I've got these images, and then at the bottom, I've got the footer itself. Now for this, I really want this structurally to be broken into 2 sections. Basically the footer by itself, and then everything else neatly contained. So what I'm gonna do is with this header and the images section selected, I'm just gonna right click and I'm gonna choose to add a stack, which is gonna wrap it in a new frame with a stack layout. And then I'm gonna come over here and get rid of the gap because it adds a default gap of 10 pixels and I don't want that. And I'm just gonna rename this main. So I've got my main stack of content on the page. The desktop breakpoint itself is also a stack, and that's gonna allow us to have the automatic height. So that way, as the page gets longer, the breakpoint's gonna make room. And if the page gets shorter, the breakpoint is gonna stay snugged up to the content. But now that we have this basic structure, we can select the footer itself. And the big thing here is switching it from relative positioning to fixed positioning. And fixed positioning fixes the element to the viewport. It fixes it to the browser window. So we don't have a browser window when we're editing our document on the canvas. So we're gonna have to work with a preview on the canvas and also preview mode to see what we're really gonna get here. But I don't want this footer to be fixed to the top. That would make sense for like a nav bar, but for the footer, we want it fixed to the bottom of the browser. So I'm going to click into the field here that represents how close we want the footer to be to the bottom. I want it to be 0 pixels from the bottom of the footer, flush with the bottom of the viewport. And you'll notice on the canvas, the footer just kind of disappeared. So I'm gonna press Command 2 on my Mac to center it in view. And it came up here, which might seem a bit arbitrary, but if we look below, it says viewport here. Again, we don't have the viewport when we're editing on the canvas. That's specific to the browser window. So here on the canvas, we get this viewport preview and we can put it wherever we want. But if we really wanna see what this looks like, we wanna press Command or Control P to go into preview mode. And now you can see our footer is in fact fixed to the bottom of the viewport, the bottom of the browser window, but it's on top. We don't want that. So I'm gonna go back to the canvas here. And again, with my footer selected, I'm gonna come down a little bit on the properties panel to the styles section, and you'll see that it has a Z index of 1. That Z index got applied automatically when I switched this to fixed positioning, but a Z index of 1 puts it above everything else. Everything defaults to 0. So 1 is above 0, 2 is above 1, 3 is above that, etc., etc. What I really want is the opposite. I want the footer to be at 0, and I want everything else to be above on layer 1. So I'm going to switch this from 1 to 0. You'll notice nothing happened on the canvas. But now if I select our main section, I can come down to styles, and you'll notice there's no Z index. I've got to add a style for that. I'll add Z index, and I'm going to set this to 1. So I've effectively reversed the foreground-background relationship between the content and the footer. The footer's now on top. And you can already see a problem here. We've got some transparency between the foreground and the background, so we can see the footer through the cracks in between these images. If I go into preview mode here, you can see that the footer is always just kind of lurking there in the background, which is not what we want. We want it to be obscured until it's time for it to show up. So with that main section selected, I'm just gonna add a fill. A fill will do the trick. So I'll add a fill, and I will set that fill to black, which was our original background color there. Now, on to the next issue. If I preview this again and scroll down to the bottom where we expect our footer to peek out the bottom, it doesn't peek out the bottom. Because again, our desktop breakpoint is a stack and it's fitting itself to the content of the stack. Anything that's set to an absolute position or a fixed position isn't really considered part of the stack. So it's not making room for our footer. Our footer isn't really content of the stack. So what we need to do is go back and add a little extra space so that the footer has room to poke out the bottom. So with the footer selected, one thing that I want to check is how much space do we need? And the answer is here under height. The height of this footer is currently 345 pixels. So mental note, we need an extra 345 pixels at the bottom of the desktop breakpoint. So I'm going to select the desktop breakpoint, and I'm going to come over here to padding, and I don't want to have padding all the way around. I just want padding at the bottom. So I'm going to click here to separate the sides, and then I can come down here to bottom, and that number, if I remember correctly, was 345. So basically, I've just created an extra 345 pixels of nothingness that stick out the bottom, and that should give us room for our footer to slide into place, even though it's really this blank space that's sliding over the footer. So I'll preview this again, and as we scroll down, we're going to reach the bottom of the content, but we're going to have space for the footer to slide into view. And there you have it, a clean way to create a fixed footer that always stays tucked away until your content reveals it with some nice layered depth. It adds a bit of polish to the very end of a page, and it's flexible enough to adapt to different layouts or footer designs as your site evolves. That's it for this one. I'll see you in the next one.